Welcome to Designs by Diane. This is the first workshop for the group that's working toward the Georgia National Fair for 2014. We met on January the 25th for our first meeting, and we didn't have as good of a turnout as I had hoped, but several had health issues and things that came up, and the temperature was in the teens, so it was a very cool morning. But we did have a good time, and we hammered out some of the details. My overall goal for this is to help you get the quilt that you want ready for the fair and to feel good about it and to possibly be competitive with it with other quilters. We want to get it, not just get it finished, but get it finished and get it entered in time. You have to have it entered about a month before the fair, and a lot of people don't realize that, so they wait till the last minute. So we want to make sure it's ready for that. I also want us to improve our skills. Pick something that is doable but makes you stretch just a little bit, and that way we know we've gone up a notch with our skills from the before this. I would like for you to add a technique to this quilt that you have not already done. Learn something new. Always try with your projects to go that next level. I want you to get encouragement from the others in the classroom. We had a little talk about positive versus negative comments. We want to be very positive, but we don't want to be impractical. So we want to help each other and encourage each other and help keep each other on task. If you stay on track, you will have your quilt done in plenty of time and not be pushed. If you don't, if somebody's not there poking you with that stick to keep you going, sometimes we wait till the last minute, and we want to do this in time to make sure it's our best work and we can get it done in time. We did decide on the fourth Saturday of every other month, so our next meeting will be the fourth Saturday of March. We will meet at 10 o'clock. Everybody liked that time. It gives you a little bit more time to get ready and get here. We came up with a few workshop ideas that they would like to cover. These include applique, binding, mitered corners, and Y seams. If you're planning to come to this next workshop and you have something else you want covered, please let me know and I'll try to work that in. The other thing I asked them was, how can I help you? And I got several comments, mainly just by my input and just by having this workshop. It's been great for all of them. And they're able to come and spread out and be kept on track, so that works. When you come, this is an all-day workshop, so bring a light lunch. Don't bring things that are messy or smelly. Try to steer away from fish and things like that. I do have a large trash can. Put your stuff in that sealed trash can when you're done. Be neat. Clean up after yourself. You know the general rules. If you bring something to drink, try to bring something with a lid on it that will not spill if knocked over. It helps. Sometimes these things happen and something gets knocked over, but we want to reduce the spillage as much as possible. Also, this first workshop, it was 13 degrees outside, and we're in an old school, and the heater just could not compete with that. So we were kind of cool on the other side. So we moved over to my side, the first rooms that I've got. But do dress in layers, whether it's winter or summer. You know, dress where you can either get warmer or cooler as the day goes. Stay productive in these workshops. I don't mind you talking with other quilters, but do not keep them from their work. If you want to discuss something with them, by all means, encourage them. They will encourage you, but be very productive. We want to get as much done in these workshops as we can. Take breaks as needed. A lot of people come here and they try to work straight through, and their back will lock up and their neck. You're not going to get near as much done. If you'll work a little bit, take a break, walk around, go to the restroom, get you a little snack, come back, do some more work, take another break. You will be a lot more productive in the end. Please turn your cell phones off, or if you get a call, step out in the hall to talk so that it does not distract others. And try to come preparing not to answer your phone. This is your free day. Just tell them, I'm so far out, you're out of range, and then they won't call you. But I want you to enjoy being here and being away from home, so try to manage that. Also, if you come, the first group had to fill out an information sheet. So the first time you come, you'll have an information sheet to fill out. I want to know your view of where you are with your skills, what you would like to accomplish in this, how you feel about your quilting, and so I'll have an information sheet for you to fill out. Now, as far as entering quilts in competition, it's different than making one for your child or your nephew or niece. Know what you're getting into. We're going to be putting this in the Georgia National Fair in Perry, Georgia this fall, probably October something. We need to go to the website, and I have a paper handout with the websites on it. When you come, you get one of these. If not, just search for Georgia National Fair in Perry, Georgia, and it will come up. Go to the site's homepage, and on the top there's a tab that gets you to the information page for the competitions. Now you have general rules for the competitions, and then you have a special section for quilts. So make sure you check both sections. If you go to that site right now, these were the rules and qualifications for 2013, and it tells you that. They may change a little bit for 2014, but not drastically. So you can get the gist of them there. By reading this, you can feel more comfortable about entering this quilt. The more you know, the less your stress level is. So we want to relieve that stress level. There is an online entry form, but I was informed that this fall they want everything done online. Used to you could print out the paper form. You're going to have a couple of things that I'll go over later that you have to know to put on that form, but it's not a hard form once you learn the basics of what they're asking for. There is a special quilt rules section, so review that. Also, go to the internet if you want to know what are the judges looking for, or how do you do this certain technique. Check out youtube.com, amazon.com. Look for books on it. Sometimes you can actually preview the books and see something in there, and if it helps you, you'll know to purchase it or not to purchase it. Also, quilting websites, a lot of them will have materials for you, free information. Check those out depending on what quilt you're working on. Don't be so hard on yourself. Your quilt is better than you think it is. Most people are just really, all they can center on are the few things that they didn't get perfect. The overall quilt is what the judges are going to be looking at. So don't be so hard on yourself. And when the judges judge you, they don't know you personally, so don't take it personally. It's going to sting when you read their remarks, but eventually you'll get over that, and you can read them and get some information which will help you in the future. Another thing, when you pick your quilt up after the fair, there are certain check-in dates you have to check your quilt in, and there are certain pick-up dates and times, and you have to know those. So when you go to pick up your quilt, you will get your comments at that time. When you get your comments section, don't open them and read them right there in that group of people. Wait until you're alone. Then read them, put them away. When you get some distance from it, pull it out and read it again, and it won't hurt so bad, and then you can be productive with it. This will help you for next year. It will help you become a better quilter. It will help you gain confidence, and so it's very important. In the workshop, I started out talking about the general grading system that they use in the fair. And we want to get used to the general rules so that this time we will know more what we're getting into. When the judges are judging your quilt, it's 0 to 100%. You're going to get so many points for this and so many points for that. If you're a 90 or above, you're first place, and this is how it's been in the past. General appearance of your quilt is going to give you 20 points, 20%. So make sure that quilt looks the best it can look. You want to pick appropriate fabrics, colors, patterns, but does it hang straight? Is your binding good? Those kinds of things. So make sure overall you don't have any stains on it. You got all your marks out if you had to mark on it. Make sure those things are in place, and you'll have 20 points right there. Okay, your quilting stitch is another 20%, 20 points. If you're hand quilting, make sure they're tiny stitches and you've gotten your marks off of the quilt and they look uniform. If you've used white thread on an ecru quilt, you might want to think of a natural thread on that. So look at your stitch and your thread that you're using. If you're quilting on a sewing machine or a long arm, make sure your tension is correct. Tension is very important. You should not see the bottom thread on the top, and you should not see the top thread on the bottom. They should meet in the middle of the batting, so you shouldn't see either one on the other side. If that is not the case, you need to work on that, and there are YouTube videos, there are different things you can go to find out how to do this. It's not hard, but make sure you get that right. Finishing is 15%. Is it hanging straight? Is your binding good? Did you sew the little miter together on your binding? Is the same amount of binding showing on the front as on the back? Is your binding color appropriate? So make sure you finished your quilt appropriately. If it needed some wrinkles steamed out or marks taken off, make sure those are done. Level of difficulty, 20%. You can get 20 points here. Now, if you're in the intermediate or beginner category, don't do a quilt pattern that should be in the Master Quilter. Don't try something that is too hard for you because they can figure that out very quickly. But they don't want you to have one giant 4-patch either. So pick out a quilt that shows that you have some skill level, but is not above your skills. It might take a little more work than some things you've worked on in the past, but we want to show that we can do this and do it properly. If you're doing a bear paw, you want to do those bear paw blocks where the toes of the bear are well pedicured. They're not floating and they're not cut off. That is the point of a bear paw. So anything you do, you want to make sure your seams meet correctly, your blocks are shaped correctly. So make sure of that. Workmanship of piecing or applique. Now we'll talk about the piecing first. When you piece a quilt, you're including the cutting and the sewing, the stitch. Are your seams nested together, or did you totally miss lining up your seams? So we want to make sure that our piecing is accurate and appropriate. Applique. Make sure that if your needle turn applique is done properly, you should not see the stitches. You should not have puckers. You should not have wrinkles at the edge. You should not see lines drawn below it where you missed placement or you did not get those lines out. So make sure that any piecing or applique is done correctly, and that's another 25%. You may not make 100 on this quilt, but we want to make the highest score we can. What do the judges look for? They want a quilt that's memorable. When they walk away from 25 quilts they've looked at, you want theirs to be the one, yours to be the one they remember. So make your quilt memorable, whether it's how you used colors or the colors you used, or did you put crystals on it to make it sparkle. Whatever you did, be very tasteful with it, but make it appropriate and memorable. If you have quilted it appropriately, if it's an antique quilt, you will have an antique pattern on it. If it is a contemporary quilt, you may have some wild quilting pattern on it. But you wouldn't put a contemporary quilting motif on an old-fashioned quilt. It just wouldn't, it would look out of place. So make sure you have appropriate quilting motifs. The other thing is density. Make sure if part of your quilt is very closely quilted, the rest of it is quilted to the same density. You don't want big areas that aren't quilted and then very tight. They want it uniform across the quilt. We want our seams to meet, our thread tension to look good. Make sure, if you have light areas on that quilt, don't let your dark threads show through where they were over there under the wrong place. And if you iron your seams, if you cannot iron them toward the dark for some reason, make sure they do not show through your lighter fabrics in an inappropriate way. On your bindings, you want your binding to be full. We don't want wrinkles and floppiness. They want it full, and they want the same amount showing on the front as on the back. The other thing they want is, you want a good stitch, hand stitch, sewing it down. They want the miter sewn closed, and they want that miter on a 45. If you sew down too far before you started in the other direction, your miter might not be at a 45, so they want to see that 45-degree mark on that miter. Make that good first impression. Make it eye-catching. Make them want to come back and show it to somebody else. Have you seen the one back here? Oh, you've got to see this quilt. So make yours have that wow factor. Make it your own. Even though it's someone else's pattern, do something that puts your personal stamp on it. Put colors that you like, or quilting that you like, or crystals if you want to, or applique, whatever you do. Add something that makes it your quilt and not just any quilt. Make sure this quilt is clean, odor-free. If you smoke or you have any odors in your home, you need to air this out and get it out of there. Don't have pet hair on this quilt. They don't like that, and they don't want threads or stains. If you get all of your threads off before it comes to the show and one thread gets on there, they're not going to have a problem with that. But if it shows that you did not even try to get the threads off, they're going to know that. Also, make sure you don't have any stains or fading. Sometimes when you wash a quilt the first time, it will fade. Make sure that if you have any areas that faded, you do something and get that back out of there, because they will notice that. Also, if you spilled your coffee on it, you're going to have to get that stain out. They don't want stains on it. Label your quilt well. If your label is easy to get off, there is a chance your quilt might walk away. It has happened. I don't like to think of it happening here, but it has happened at some shows. So put your label on there with the pertinent information, and make sure you attach it well so it's not real easy to come off. Make sure your quilt is square. You cannot square up a quilt at the last minute. You need to make sure that everything that you sew is square, and as you trim, it's square, and your cutting is squared up. When you get the final product done, you square the corners, add the binding, and it should be square. If you decide to wash your quilt before you put it in the show, make sure you take it out and block it. You can buy styrofoam sheets from the home improvement store. Put 2 of them side by side, and you'll have an 8-foot by 8-foot section. You can take T-pins and, measure out where your quilt should come to. Make sure it is squared on there, and let it dry that way when you wash it. And most of all, have fun. We don't want to do this and be miserable. We want to enjoy our quilting. Now, work toward an orderly quilt. If you're working on a quilt and it becomes chaos, you're not going to enjoy working on it. So we want to cut accurately. We want to sew accurately. Then we want to set our seams, then open up the top layer and bump it open so we don't have pleats in there. If you need to actually open your seam up and iron it that way, do it. As you put your quilt together and work on other parts, don't mess up the ironing you just did. If you have to tilt your iron back where it won't uniron what you've already ironed, do that. But keep the back of your quilt nice and orderly, and it's much more pleasurable to work on. Try to reduce bulk in your seams. If you're making a 4-patch, there are nice, Billy Lauder is a good one to search on YouTube. She has all these little tips and techniques, and she will tell you when you're putting a 4-patch together, you put it together, and when you sew that last seam, you're going to go to the center and shake it to where the seam comes apart just a little bit, and you can iron half of it one way, half the other, and it reduces bulk. If you have a block where all the seams come to a point in the center, if you iron all your seams in one direction and then splay the little top knot that's left in the other direction, you'll have a little pinwheel going the other way, and there's no bulk. So there are some tricks that you can use to make sure that you don't have bulky areas in your quilt. Clip your threads as you go. I didn't do this at the beginning, and I wish I had. It's easier now with the little cutter on the side of your sewing machine. Make use of that. But clip your threads, and also chain stitch as much as you can, because then when you whack those apart, there are no threads to clip. You have one at the beginning and one at the end. So clip those threads and get them out of the way. Drop them in the trash, put a little piece of batting over here or on your shoulder and put them on there. Keep them under control where they don't get in places they shouldn't be. Don't let dark threads flow over under light areas of your quilt, so that when they're quilted, you can see those dark threads over there. It doesn't look good, and the judges will catch it. The other thing is, be very careful with your backing and batting. Don't let your batting, don't open it up and let it lie around and get threads on it of different colors, because when you put it in your quilt, any threads that got on that batting will show through light areas on the top or light areas on the back. So make sure you keep your batting thread free. And also your backing. When you put your backing out and get ready to do your quilt, make sure no loose stray threads are on there. When your borders are put on, and as a long armor, I find this from time to time, I will quilt a quilt and take it off the machine, and I offer to trim it for people at no charge. I will start to trim that quilt, and I get to one side, and the border is 1 inch wider or 1/2 inch wider. Cut all of your border strips at the same time, connect them end to end, or if you cut them long way, cut them all and compare them. Make sure all your border strips are the same width before you attach them to your quilt, so that you don't have one side of your quilt longer or wider than the other one. Audition fabrics. I'm really big on this. I don't know what my quilt is going to look like at the end. I know what I'm aiming for, but a lot of times I thought I was going to use one fabric for the first border and it didn't look right, so I switched colors. Audition your fabrics as you go and make sure you pick out the best one for that part of the quilt. Don't be afraid to change that design as you go. If you want to mix up your colors or change something or add an extra border, if that's what you feel that quilt needs, do it. Use only good quality materials. This is not just for the fabric on the top or the backing on the back. Don't buy an inexpensive batting if you've put all that time and energy into the top and the backing. Buy good quality materials for the complete quilt and you will have a better product. If you're putting this in competition and you're not really good at quilting, you may want to use a busy backing, a print backing, so that if you have any starts or stops or any bobbles or anything, it won't show through on the back and the judges won't notice it so much. If you're really proud of your quilting and you want it all to show, use a solid color. It does not matter which one. As long as it's solid or almost solid, you will see all of the stitching beautifully and it will show the definition on the back of the quilt. So make sure of that. Also add bling to your quilt. We don't want it to look like a circus clown, but we do want it noticeable and we want to add those accoutrements. You can put on a suit and you look really nice, but when you add the bracelet and the earrings and the necklace and the rings and the scarf, and it makes it a totally different outfit. So on our quilts, we want to add a little bling. Now, this can be trapunto or false trapunto. Applique. Embroidery. Don't over embroider. We don't want a heavy, stiff quilt, but it can really be used in small amounts to enhance and add to that quilt. Piping is very nice to set things off. You can either put on a piping or a flange just inside the the binding, or you can put it in with some of the borders. Prairie points look good on some quilts. Couching, that is where you take an unusual yarn or ribbon or whatever, and you put it across the top and just weave it around, and you're going to sew across it just enough to keep it in place, and it adds a three-dimensional effect to your quilt. So think of some things like this that might really set your quilt off from the rest of them, and win that ribbon. Bring that ribbon home. Now, if you go to the Georgia National Fair site, it's Georgia National Fair .whatever, you can search it and find it. You'll come up with an entry form, which one of the things on it is quilt delivery dates. You have to have your quilt there on certain days between certain hours. The other option is there are certain quilt shops who will accept your quilt. You put all your information in there, put it in a pillowcase, and leave it at that quilt shop, and they will guarantee delivery of your quilt to the fair. So that's another option. Now, you're going to have a couple of things to fill out, whether it's online or on the paper part. One of them, they want a brief description of your quilt. Don't be afraid to brag on your quilt a little bit. Talk about the enhancements you've put on or something about the quilt that's going to make that judge remember it. So add a little bit of bling to your description too. The other thing, you've got a couple of sections called division number and class number. Your division is beginner, intermediate, advanced, or I think it's novice, intermediate, advanced, or youth. You're going to have to pick one of those, and they let you do that. But be honest. If you're really good, don't put yourself in beginner just to get a ribbon. It's not fair to the people who really are beginners. Get into a category that you feel like you will be challenged. If you've been quilting for years and years and you've won a lot of ribbons in intermediate, go up to Master Quilter. Don't be afraid to do that. You would rather lose in Master Quilter than win in Intermediate if you knew that you really should have been in Master Quilter. So make sure of that. So it's Novice, Intermediate, Master Quilter, and Youth. That is your division number. Your class number is going to have to do with the size and how your quilt is made. Your class can be 100% cotton, appliqued, embellished, embroidered, first time you ever entered a quilt, hand quilting, mixed techniques. If you have a quilt with embroidery and it's pieced and you applique, that would be mixed techniques. If it's pieced and that's all it is, just put it in the pieced category. If it's one piece of cloth and you have quilted it all over, it would go in the whole cloth division. So make sure you put it in the right class. The other thing I want you to look at on that site, you have premiums that are paid. You win money depending on if you get first, second, or third. But there are a lot of other competitions, special categories that you can win. So look at it and decide if you want to try to enter in there. I told you about that. I told you about it. I think this is about it. Okay, one other thing that I told them, and you don't get everything I told the class because I wandered a lot. I have books from where I went to Paducah to the big quilt shows, the AQS shows. And you can buy the book that has color pictures of all the entries. Now first I want to tell you that Paducah is considered a juried show. You have to send in your entry form with pictures of your quilt and descriptions, and they go through all of them and they decide who to invite. So just being invited to a show like that is a big deal. But if you're invited, then your picture will be in one of these books. You can get these books, or if you come to my shop, you can look through them. It gives you ideas of why the quilt was accepted into this show. What is it about that quilt that's special? So you can look through here and decide which quilts were in there and why, and what can you do to your quilt to make it shine like that. The other thing, when you come to my shop to work, you're going to feel like you're moving every time, but it's worth it. You're going to bring all of your quilt that you're working on and your machine and your tools. And then when you're done, you have to go home. And I will take pieces of fleece, usually a little bit larger than this, but I saw this one and just grabbed it. And lay your pieces out. And I don't put anything right down the center. I'll put half of the stuff here and half of the stuff here to my quilt. At the end of the day, I'm going to roll this fleece up, and I can bend it in the middle and put a rubber band around here and just toss it in my bag. And all of my pieces will stay in place. When I get home to work on it, I'm just going to start unrolling it, and everything will be in the same place. So it makes it easier to work on your quilt in different locations. So when you come here and then go back home, it's not such chaos trying to figure out where you were. Now our next meeting is the 4th Saturday of March at 10 o'clock, and I hope to have some new people here this time because several of them had health issues or family issues and could not come. Please, if you have not been before, let me know because there is limited space, and if we need to do an extra day, we can do that. I look forward to seeing all of you, and I want to see all of your quilts in the fair, and I want to see them hanging up there with ribbons on them. So good luck, and let's get there together.